Hello, everyone. So my name is Nara. So I'm here with one of my co-author. But also behind this project, we have actually involved some master students actually from AIMS, mathematical, doing them students in math, as well as a postdoc in data science, because I'm personally a public economics, so I have no knowledge of data science or machine learning. But so I thought it was very interesting to actually bring those disciplines in, and we want to really further that project by bringing more of these two disciplines. So basically, this is an outline. We'll talk about the motivation. Why are we basically interested in this project? And of course, the contribution and some of the preliminary results. And again, this is a disclaimer. It's literally preliminary results because we really want the opportunity to deepen the methodology and also expand it, because this study is based on Uganda, but we really want to expand it to South Africa and other cities that with which we are talking currently. So we know that there's a rapid urbanization in our cities, right? Saying that, I mean, with the rate going up to 60% by 2050. And of course, that comes with tremendous challenges, but also opportunities. So in this project, we really want to see to what extent we can take advantage of the opportunities, especially by focusing on the relationship between revenue mobilization and access to quality service delivery, but also access to service delivery. So we know that as the cities are growing, of course, there's the massive extension in terms of the revenue base. More residents are coming, more businesses are coming, possibility to extend property taxation, but also local taxes and revenues. And then, of course, once we have that, then you have a bit more resources at the local level to actually invest in infrastructure and therefore sustain local economic development. We want to see to what extent, basically, this opportunity can actually materialize in our city, and then if not, why not? We started by focusing on Uganda here because, again, we just had property tax data at the Uganda level because I was still talking with the National Treasury. It was taking a bit too long, so we started with what we had at the Uganda level. And then, of course, we have that rapid urbanization as well at Uganda level. And then, of course, here the objective is to literally assess the relationship between urban growth, revenue mobilization, and service delivery. So literature review, I'll go quickly over that. As we see that it's really important to really see, to examine that intersection between growth, revenue mobilization, and service delivery. But what we see in the literature is just the relationship between either or, like urban growth and revenue generation and urban growth and service delivery. But the holistic approach is a bit missing. And of course, we see they tend to be, in the literature, we tend to have the cluster of research highlighting a positive relationship between urban growth and revenue mobilization, and then others also showing a negative relationship between urban growth and service delivery. But here, again, to our knowledge, we really lacking that thorough examination of the threefold interaction. Maybe because it's not doable, we don't know. So that's why we're trying to test. And also, again, like that, say that pairwise approach rather than the holistic. And then, of course, few studies are basically using this digital tool, GIS, machine learning, and deep learning, learning as well to explore the dynamics between these relationships. And this is basically what we're trying to do here. So what is a proposed methodology? And again, I involved the students to say, actually, interestingly, because we wanted to start, I contacted AIMS Africa to say, can I basically give this part of this topic to your students? Because they were looking for opportunity to actually apply what they learned. So I say, I have an application field. Do you want to try? And they say yes. So two students basically help with this. So in terms of the proposed methodology, again, land cover classification, we used the card methodology, the random forest, and the support vector machine to actually assess, again, the urban growth. And of course, they used the Google Earth engine here to help with the analysis. Revenue mobilization, again, we had access to the property-related taxes at the district level, but also the towns level and the municipalities, but we ended up conducting the analysis only at the district level because that's where the data was a bit more consistent. For the service delivery analysis, we use the Afrobarometer. So we basically focus on the rounds that were aligned with the 2011 and 2015 here, in terms of the base year and the target year to analyze the relationships. Based on that, basically we focus on these essential services like health, education, water, electricity, and food, a presence of security infrastructure, but also how the citizens are perceiving the government handling of the public services. So the access question was basically yes or no, and then for the what do you think about the performance of the government, they basically scaled their response between very well, fairly well, and badly, and so forth. And therefore, so once we had the urban growth analysis, the revenue, the service delivery, now we were trying to find, again, a deep method to put all of that together. And that's where the students were a bit struggling. But again, this is the opportunity for us to really see how we can deepen this analysis. Again, the optimal goal here is to make sure that we go to the policymakers with evidence-based recommendation in terms of how can they really tap into the expansion, the rapid expansion of urbanization in your city to make sure that you can mobilize the revenue that you need and, of course, provide the service to your people as they need so. So in terms of preliminary insights, through the satellite imageries, we managed to classify, of course, the whole district level Uganda into those urban classes: crop, forest, barren land, and water. Again, comparing 2011, 2015. Sorry. And once that was done, then we applied, we used those three methods to basically algorithm to do the classification. And then, of course, we now use, for each of those classifiers, we calculated the areas occupied by each of those 5 classes, again, between 2011 and 2015. And of course, the difference between the two gave us the growth. And of course, in order to determine which of the 3 methods is the best, we use an evaluation metric. And of course, the evaluation metric told us that the card method algorithm was the best, which we then use to further the analysis. Again, so this is a little bit what the card basically tells us between 2011, 2015. Again, as you can see, the red part just basically show that, yes, indeed, in certain region in Uganda, you can see that rapid expansion at the district level. So here, basically, you can see the first column, the first card there. We basically cluster some of the districts into 3 groups. The districts that really showed no urban growth, no change in urban growth, and the district that showed a rapid growth, and then, of course, the district that showed a negative growth. And from there, we started now trying to then overlay that with the responses in terms of service delivery. I will go, the graphs again is a bit messy because in terms of they're all over the place. And this is basically what the analysis tells us, that you can see that in some high growth districts, people are still very still dissatisfied in terms of the quality of the service delivery that they receive, whether for food, water, sanitation, and so forth. And they were actually saying that, yes, the government, in terms of performance, they showed some effort, but overall they were not satisfied. For the district with no change, interestingly, you saw some satisfaction in terms of basic services related to food and water. Yes, and then of course the perception then say, okay, the government is actually doing something. And then for district with negative growth, again, there you see again some a bit of there are actually high level of satisfaction for food and school, and then access to electricity, water, and sanitation, they were not that happy. So overall, you see here that, of course, the results again, no, let me just maybe go straight to, so that was the urban growth and service delivery. Now in terms of the urban and revenue mobilization. Again, we want to see to what extent we are actually tapping into the potential of the urbanization, because again, with urbanization comes great increase in revenue base. So is the city basically able, or the district able, to tap into that massive increase in revenue base? So what we see here is that, again, focusing on districts that show rapid urban growth, again, you can see a bit results are a bit all over the place as well. Some show, a bit of revenue increase. Others actually show no revenue increase at all. And then for country districts where the urban growth was not that great, then you see as well here. You see again that there's not a clear trend coming up from there. So overall, what can we say is that, of course, there's not a clear, the relationship between those three basically are complex. We can't really extract a clear relationship between, again, urban growth and citizen satisfaction, as well as revenue mobilization. So definitely we need a deeper analysis, whether correlation analysis or regression analysis, to have a deeper understanding. And this is, again, where we really want to bring more that expertise from data science, but also geography, and combined with our expertise in municipal finance, to see basically what more can we say and what kind of trends can we extract from this. And again, to provide evidence-based policy or recommendation to local municipalities. So we will definitely, the next step is to finalize that, strengthen the methodology, and of course expand to South Africa. We have started discussing with the National Treasury, the people in charge at the local level, especially because apparently there's geocoded data sets that are coming up at the local level, especially linked to revenue. So I hope people here can confirm that, which will basically help us roll out this project also at the South African level. How am I doing in time? Okay, cool. And of course, we actually, the Public Policy Hub, which I'm heading, and the chair, which I'm holding, we want basically to bring more data science in postdocs in data science and geography to really see what more can be done here. Again, because through our MOUs with some of the cities that we have an MOU with City of Joburg and Tshwane. We want to see again how can we basically collaborate with the cities to really unpack this project. and especially because for us, the transdisciplinary approach is really important. The issues, like was said earlier this morning, the challenges are just too high for us to think that we can then tackle these big challenges that our cities are facing with just one discipline, water economics. So really that transdisciplinary approach is key. But of course, for us, it's very important to actually co-produce the knowledge also with local officials so that, again, at the end, whatever we produce can already be literally be taken up for their policy reform. And we also want to expand it to something that actually started being done by some researchers, students in Cape Town, and we really want to expand it again. Some cities have already expressed the interest of furthering this study, using web-based tool to actually detect solar panel, again, it was mentioned earlier, from the comfort of the office without sending people on the ground necessarily, to have literally that understanding of the electricity generation potential at our city level. And we also want to expand it to the second project to identify renewable energy sources in our city, whether solar, wind, or biomass, depending on where the municipalities are located. Again, to see what is the potential that our cities basically have and can be maximized for improved policy. So this is what we had to present this morning with you. So we hope, you can share ideas on how to basically explore this further. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. I just had a question, one question, one comment. The one was on the maps showing urban expansion, and I've done some work in Uganda, and I've traveled there before. Yeah. I was quite surprised to see what I thought was Kampala not having any expansion, but I wondered maybe I'm also misreading it, so I thought I'd just ask, is that correct, that Kampala is not actually expanding, or at least between 2011 and 2015, but that northeastern area and northern area were expanding?
It actually interesting. So I think it was among the cities showing stagnation, because again, it's a short period, it's not massive, and then it's not like you can see annual growth in the city. It's mostly over time, and you can see that the period is a bit short. But again, we were a bit surprised. That's why the students, we asked them to try the three techniques to just see again, is there a problem there? And then finally they said, yes. Based on that, we had the cart approach, and let me see actually from the data set what was said about cart. No, actually, Kampala showed a percentage. It was a positive one. But I didn't show it. But the percentage showed a small positive increase between 2011 and 2015. But some literally showed a negative. And then when we were trying to show the explanation, we were thinking that maybe those are mostly agricultural areas, but where people are left to go to Kampala and Entebbe. But then there's been a bit of a booming in terms of agricultural. So that's where also in those districts you tend to see a bit of increase in revenue mobilization, maybe linked to agricultural activities, while urban growth was decreasing, right? So it was actually interesting to see things were not as we were expected, and that's why we need to deepen the analysis.
Great, thanks. And then the comment was on the geocoded data that's at SARS.
Yes.
I think one of the challenges you're going to have is the turnover information is at a firm level, which would suffer from a head office effect.
Ayanda said, the lady in charge said that they actually have postal code.
Oh, so they've got geocoded data now.
Yeah.
But the geocoded data is for the PAYE data, which is done at a branch level for the most part.
Okay.
But the turnover information would still come from the same place, which means you would need to have an approach to disaggregate turnover to branches.
Okay, I'll need to talk to you.
We can take it up after.
Cool.
So Andrew was mentioning something about the picture as well, and I looked at that and I thought, wow, Uganda is now like a fully urban place like Gauteng. So I'm actually kind of concerned about how well your classifiers can pick up between 5 different places, right? And so classifier models are notoriously bad at actually classifying correctly. So one of the things I would encourage you to report is what the actual correct classification rates are. My guess is that they're in the sort of 25-30% range, if you're lucky, given sort of the fact that you've got 5 sort of things. And I want to know what you're classifying better than others, because that's massive. Right? It suggests that we've created Gauteng in 4 years in half the country. And so right, from a, go back a little bit, I think, and pick apart some of these kinds of things instead of just reporting, this cross-validation technique said this is the best model. Actually dig a bit. And I would encourage you to maybe, the water one's probably easy, but the other 4, I think you're probably really struggling to keep them apart very well.
Okay, thank you. Again, please just be aware again that this was a part of the exercise from the master students, right? So this is what the preliminary result, we work with them, and that's where we said that we will actually looking for postdocs to actually deepen this analysis. But thank you very much. Any suggestion will be welcome on how to do so.
Thanks for the presentation. That was great. So your key variable of interest, your dependent variable is largely revenue mobilization. Am I right? Is that?
I'm sorry?
Is the main variable you're wanting insight on revenue mobilization? You're wanting to understand?
So for now, we want to assess the relationship between urban growth, revenue mobilization, and access to service, satisfaction to service delivery.
And by revenue mobilization, are you talking about an absolute figure for revenue?
No, in this case, we had data, local data on property taxation, local taxes, hotel taxes. We focus on property tax for now.
But it will be absolute, so total property. All right. So, I mean, a normal sort of growth model would always kind of suggest that population growth will result in economic growth or because of agglomeration and various things. And I would imagine a lot of the time that would be true fairly self-evidently for revenue as well. The more kind of nuanced view, like so from the City of Cape Town perspective, for example, where you do have significant population growth, it really depends what that population growth is like. So almost all of it will create some degree of revenue growth, but it might not create a higher percentage of revenue growth than existing, because if the population's growing with lower collection rates amongst new migrants or whatever the situation is, then yes, you're getting more revenue, but potentially per capita the situation's not changing. So I was wondering, have you looked at sort of a little bit more dynamic indicators as your dependent variable? So for instance, let's say something like, so not every city will have like a net savings, but like a net savings, or let's say something like expenditure per capita, so municipal expenditure per capita, I think would be an interesting one to look at. Because I would imagine it wouldn't be too difficult to find a relationship between population growth and density growth, etc., and revenue growth. I would imagine that that's there, it's fairly self-evident. But what impact is it having on the fiscal sustainability of the place? I think that would be my
question. Actually, we're actually conducting a parallel analysis currently, where we actually want to see assessing the impact of measures of fiscal decentralization on GVA, because now we have those the measures of economic growth at the local level. So that's where we are basically using all those, identifying all those potential explanatory variables, in addition to fiscal autonomy. And we also measure using a measure of fiscal decentralization using expenditure decentralization ratio, meaning to what extent the expenditure decentralization is actually impacting also local economic development at the local level in South Africa. So, and that's where we are considering all the variables that you mentioned.
But are you just considering those as explanatory variables, or also as your kind of variable of interest? Your sort of
we're actually right now examining the bidirectional causality for now.
Okay.
because obviously there's a lot of indigeneity there.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you.
It's still in process.
Thank you, Nara, for your excellent presentation. I'm just quite curious about the modeling, like the machine learning algorithms. You've used 3 supervised ML techniques.
Yeah.
And these models, or these algorithms, they are just needs intense data in order to get like a precise information or the information that we want. So I haven't seen in your presentation how those models were trained. We usually split the data 60-40, 70-30, or 80-20, and train the models, and then use the remaining data to do the validation. Have you done that? And how is the accuracy? How is models?
Okay, like I said, I'm a public economist. I have no knowledge of what you just said. But then and that's what I was so enriching, actually, working with the math students and the data science students, right? It basically helped because I was basically sharing what I know about municipal finance and fiscal decentralization and all the local, intergovernmental fiscal relation, and they were teaching me also what they know. And that's basically being that bi-directional learning process, but I can't say that I'm able to answer your questions yet. But then I'll make sure that next time we basically bring more of those explanations as we develop the model. I'm sorry.
Nara, thank you for the presentation. From a city perspective, and I think Paul can either agree or disagree with me, even the expansion is fine, and there might be some specification areas with rapid expansion. But the main question here, specifically from a revenue perspective, is the following. You have that formalization that happens within cities where you can actually access your property rights, provide your services, and so on. And then you have the informal element, or what we'd rather refer to as your urban sprawl or your peri-urban areas, where you have a lot of dependency on services, right? Which then can, if there is a tipping point where the dependency on those services outweigh the benefit, right? So the urban sprawl exceeds the rate at which we are able to provide services, and therefore the quality of life of individuals or the quality of life of people in the city and the cost of driving those. So that would be rather interesting if you're talking about urbanization and the nature of rate of urbanization, if it would be possible to classify the urbanization, because then you can also understand the nature of the problem faced by the metro, or by the state that's dealing with it. Because if you're doing urbanization and you're seeing that it's improving over time, revenues increasing, not within an African context, formalization isn't always the answer, like complete formalization like we'll see in the first world country. But in terms of gaining that balance of those who have versus those who don't have, and how we deal with that complex issue. Thank you.
So you mean to say that we need to be able to distinguish between the formal areas and informality, or urban sprawl, just to... Yes. What do you mean by urbanization?
Because what we're saying about that is if you think about migration, right? There's this preconceived notion that if I, at the base level, if I move to a city, the chance of me having a better life, right? Due to asymmetrical information. Okay. Now the problem is you'll have a lot of asymmetrical information of a lot of people moving. Yeah. Specifically, if you take Tshwane being at the crossroads, specifically its location, you'll often find that the pressure that you face in terms of increasing the demand of services and increasing at a lower income profile of people needing those services outweigh the pace at which you can match to delivering those services.
Understood.
Right, and then that has a direct revenue impact because there is a subsidization point, and at some point that subsidization point cripples, and then it doesn't matter how much urban you have, then your urbanization is going to start hurting you.
Thank you. We will make sure to account for that. Appreciate it.
I mean, I think thank you for the presentation, which is, I think you're addressing a really important issue. And this relationship, right, between urban growth, revenue generation, and investment in public services is fundamental to sustainable urbanization. And a big problem in many African cities, including some South African cities, is that it's not, that relationship is broken down, okay, for various reasons. I think you need to unpack. You need to spell out the relationship more clearly. You need to unpack the elements of what makes this relationship effective one of which is to do with property registration, of course, and whether people, another one is whether migrants are so poor they can't afford to pay anything for services. But for this virtuous circle, you need to have property registration systems, you need to have a number of things in place in order to collect the revenue and maybe start somewhere. That's a problem. People don't start anywhere because there's no system. So it is partly about this informal, formal thing, but it's also about fit-for-purpose registration systems, not some world-class standard that's unaffordable and it cannot be sustained, but a realistic, pragmatic, digital, probably digital system that enables people to start paying something. And I mean, just the example from South Africa, which would be really interesting for you to test, is cities with high levels of traditional land ownership within their boundaries, like eThekwini, Buffalo City. These cities have massive problems that people are moving to traditional areas, investing in big, expensive houses and paying no rates, right? Because of, partly because access to land, partly because they can escape the tax system. And this needs to be exposed, and we need to have a response to deal with this because it's going to bankrupt cities. They demand services, but they pay nothing.
Thanks. Thank you so much. That's a very important point you raised.
I just had one last comment just on that mapping and land use classification.
Yeah.
One other thing would be to compare that to some of the existing publicly available land use classifications. I think you can download a couple of them from Google Earth Engine, just to see how they compare, given some of the queries about the accuracy.
Thank you so much. They actually mentioned that. Appreciate it. Thank you. Thank you again for your help and participation.